Santa Cruz Research Project. The Monastery of Santa Cruz of Coimbra, yesterday, today and tomorrow. The Monastery of Santa Cruz is located in the heart of Coimbra, in the old Arrabal, just outside the walls of the medieval city. Coimbra, the Roman Armenium, is located on a height dominating a north-south crossing over the Mondego River. When Portugal became an independent kingdom in 1143, Coimbra was the first residence of the king and court. It was therefore the new country's first capital. The monastery of Santa Cruz was founded in 1131 by a group of 12 canons regular of St. Augustine, including the Archdeacon Tello, the schoolmaster João Peculiar, and the future Saint Theotonius. The foundation of the monastery had the direct support of King Afonso Henriques, the first Portuguese monarch, who made Coimbra his headquarters for the advance of his new Christian kingdom to the south. The monastery of Santa Cruz was built outside the city walls to the north, at the foot of the Ribella Valley, on the site of some ancient Roman baths. The medieval monastery had its own wall with watchtowers at intervals. The monastery consisted of a Romanesque-style church, of which only a few traces remain, and an original cloister, which has long since disappeared. At the beginning of the 16th century, King Manuel had the church completely rebuilt in the late Gothic Manuelin style, the work of the master Diogo de Boitac. The wide portal in soft white Ansa stone was the work of Diogo do Castilho. The sculptures have been attributed to Nicolas Chantereine, except for the three central figures, a later work by Jean de Rohan. In the interior, King Manuel had a pair of new tombs made for the first two kings of Portugal, Afonso Henriques and Sancho I. He ordered the tombs to be placed in the final bay of the nave. The church's new vault was designed by Diogo de Boitac. He also built the vault of the chancel, which bears the royal symbols of King Manuel, the Portuguese coat of arms, the armillary sphere, and the cross of Christ. The general design of the royal tombs has been attributed to João de Castilho, who was then busy with work at the Jerónimos monastery in Lisbon. Work was carried out by teams of masons and sculptors, most likely coordinated by his half-brother Diogo de Castilho. The recumbent statues of the monarchs are by Nicolas Chantereine. Both tombs were soon after dismantled and moved from the nave to the chancel, following the relocation of the chancel stalls to the new high choir of the church in 1531. The main cloister was also rebuilt in Manuelin style under the master Marcos Pires. King João III, the son of Manuel, ordered a redesign of the monastery in 1527. The new king's plan was to impose an order of strict enclosure on the monks, in accordance with the new constitutions of the Canons Regular of St. Augustine. In this task, he had the support of the reformer, Friar Braz de Braga, a Hieronymite friar who the king placed at the head of the canons regular. This renewal of morality required new and spacious facilities. This resulted in the construction of the new refectory. The Porter's Cloister, which no longer exists, and the Manga Cloister, of which only the magnificent Renaissance fountain, the work of Jean de Rouen, remains. Linking the three cloisters, a new and extensive dormitory was built, with a central corridor and cells for the monks on both sides. This long corridor was covered by a coffered wooden vault. This was the first Renaissance convent dormitory in Portugal. Among the later additions, of particular note is the sacristy from 1622, recently attributed to the great architect Balthazar Alvarez. Also the Baroque sanctuary from the mid-18th century, an elliptical room situated above the chancel of the church at the tallest point of the monastery. In 1796, José Carlos Magne carried out a survey of Praça de Sansão, or Samson's Square, in which we can observe what the facade of the old monastery looked like. The square's name derives from a fountain, which was topped by a small statue of the famous biblical character Samson. Entrance to the monastery was via a half tempietto, similar to the one of the Manga fountain. Other artists also recorded what the old monastery looked like. This is the case of drawings by the Englishman George Vivian, who passed through Coimbra in the 1830s and who drew the monastery from the east. On the 28th of May 1834, Joaquim Antonio de Aguiar, a minister of the new liberal government that emerged from the Civil War, signed the decree for the dissolution of the religious orders in Portugal. For this reason, he became known as the Mata Frades, or friar killer. All the order's assets immediately became state property. The canons regular were also dissolved, with the monastery of Santa Cruz being divided up between various public bodies, such as the City Council, the Post Office, the Abandoned Children's Asylum, the Public Works Commission, the Municipal Jail, the Municipal Market, and others. Thus began the irreversible process of the partition and gradual destruction of the old monastic complex. At the same time, and throughout these years, a new form of technology became popular, which provided a reliable record of the old monastic building as it was being dismantled: photography. Renowned photographers passed through Coimbra, recording the old monastic facade, the church, and its various cloisters. Some important photographers of Santa Cruz were Eugène Lefebvre, Posidonio de Silva, Antero Frederico de Seabra, Jean Laurent, Antonio da Silva Magalhães, Thurston Thompson, José Sartoris, and Domingos Alvão, among others. In the mid-1860s, the monastic wing of the cart door was demolished. In 1876 to 79, the current City Hall building was built on the site of the former Porter's Cloister. And in 1888, the Arco do Correio, or Post Office Arch, was demolished, as well as the north wing of the old cloister of Manga, in order to open up a new thoroughfare between the lower city and the upper city. To the east of the monastery, the connection took the form of a new urban boulevard, the Sá da Bandeira Avenue, built on grounds belonging to the former monastery. Alterations continued into the 20th century, spurred on by fires in 1917 and 1926. A dramatic and symbolic episode was the demolition of the imposing bell tower on the 3rd of January 1935. Today, it is difficult to imagine how the old Santa Cruz monastery looked. The remaining parts and surrounding areas still serve various public services, and important parts of the former monastery have disappeared. However, the church remains open for worship, and the Cloister of Silence, the chapter house, and the sanctuary can still be visited today. The former refectory is currently a temporary exhibition room, the Sala de Cidade, or City Exhibition Hall. The profound changes that have taken place over the last 200 years and the uncertainty about what the overall structural organisation of the monastery would have looked like in the early 19th century led us to initiate the Santa Cruz Research Project. This developed around a 3D digital reconstruction of the monastery of Santa Cruz as it was in 1834, a project based at the Centre for Social Studies of the University of Coimbra, with funding from FCT through Compete 2020, Portugal 2020 and FEDER. The project team included researchers from the areas of architecture, history of art, history of photography, 3D design and modelling, computing and digital technological applications. Based on documental and iconographic research and analysis, we were able to reconstruct, with a high degree of accuracy, what the monastery of Santa Cruz would have looked like in 1834. An initial 3D model of the monastery was created in a neutral monochromatic finish with smooth surfaces. We based our general reconstruction on 4 different levels of information. Firstly, from buildings or parts of buildings still standing. Then secondly, from detailed reconstructions based on photographic evidence. And thirdly, old drawings and plans. And finally, to our conjectural reconstruction of the parts that at this stage were still missing. A second model was created by exploring the colours and textures of the various construction materials, such as stone, plaster, wood, glass, wrought iron, and ceramic roof tiles. At the same time, a walking circuit of the site with 7 hotspots was set up. These were activated by QR codes, which allowed people to view through their smartphones and tablets what the monastery was like in 1834. The cross of King Sancho I is one of the standout works of art from the old monastic estate. Today, it is on display at the National Museum of Ancient Art in Lisbon. Many other pieces of art from the former monastery are on display at the Machado de Castro National Museum in Coimbra, such as the 14th century so-called Black Christ. Likewise, one of the Manuelin heraldic angels, originally on top of the church, and the 16th century sculpture of the Deposition by Jean de Rohan. Other pieces, such as the famous Pentecost by Vasco Fernandes, known as Grão Vasco, the Pulpit by Nicolas Chantarène, and the relief sculptures of the Passion of Christ, also by Nicolas Chantarène, are today in the sacristy, in the current church, and in the cloister of Santa Cruz. Other important works of art, such as the canvases of the Manuelin Church altarpiece by Cristóvão de Figueiredo, have been divided up for display between the sacristy and a couple of national museums. A truly remarkable set is the Last Supper, commissioned by Friar Braz de Braga from the French sculptor Hodart, who completed it between 1530 and 1534 for the former monastic refectory. The Last Supper by Hodart is a set of 13 life-size terracotta human figures representing Christ and the Apostles. It was originally set inside an elevated chapel, now walled up, located at the east end of the monastic refectory. After the dissolution of the monastery, the figures were removed from the refectory, which was given over to the Association of Artists of Coimbra in 1862. The set, badly damaged, was later rescued by Antonio Augusto Gonçalves, who included it in the original collection of the Machado de Castro Museum when this opened in 1911. At that time, the head of one of the apostles and the body of another had already been lost. Today, the figures are on display in their own room in the renovated museum, which reopened in 2011 after they had been outstandingly restored. In the Santa Cruz project, we also try to recreate, through a 3D model and based on descriptions from the 16th and 17th centuries, how the original layout of Hodart's Last Supper would have appeared in the elevated chapel. We know that Christ was at the head of the table, with St. Peter to the left and St. John to the right. Judas was to the far left of the scene, next to the jamb of the chapel's portal, with his money bag to his right-hand side. The reconstitution was projected onto the wall that enclosed the opening of the original chapel in the old refectory, using 3D video mapping, which allowed for improved visualization through passive 3D glasses. The projection was on display between the 29th of January and the 16th of April 2022, as part of an exhibition of projects and designs by final year students of the Integrated Master Course in Architecture at the Faculty of Sciences and Technology of the University of Coimbra. The aim of the projects, developed by the students of the Department of Architecture, was to trial a possible near-future scenario for the former monastery building and surrounding area, based on the hypothesis of installing a museological and interpretive nucleus, which could bring together the art collection associated with Santa Cruz. At the same time, and based on UNESCO's historic urban landscape approach, the students reimagined the construction of a new vertical element of urban reference on the site of the old bell tower. They also reimagined a reconstitution of the aisles of the cloister surrounding the Renaissance manga fountain, in order to retrieve the original idea of a space of silence and introspection. Some imagined a more radical version, in which the new manga cloister would involve the demolition of the derelict post office building in order to restore the original size of the Renaissance fountain tanks. Other projects, more in keeping with the current state of the site, in which the post office building would be kept, looked at solutions to revive the idea of the old cloister, but using lighter structural systems of prefabricated wooden, metallic, or mixed construction. The Santa Cruz Research Project thus combined the histories of architecture and art with new technologies and research through design and 3D modelling with architectural and urban design. The Santa Cruz Project aimed to create connections from the present to the past and from the past to the future, seeking to integrate and rehabilitate the former monastery and surrounding area. In this sense, we think that the future rehabilitation of the monastery of Santa Cruz has the potential of becoming a truly inspiring project for Coimbra in the 21st century.